The snow fell gently outside the tall windows of Marcus Wellington's penthouse apartment, each flake catching the light from the city below. At 62 years old, Marcus had everything money could buy: a successful investment firm, houses in 3 countries, and a bank account that most people could only dream of. Yet tonight, on Christmas Eve, he sat alone at his mahogany dining table, staring at a meal prepared by his personal chef who had already gone home to spend the holiday with family. The silence in the apartment was deafening. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking each second of his solitude. Marcus picked at his perfectly cooked salmon, but food had lost its taste years ago. He reached for his phone, scrolling through contacts, but stopped. Who would he call? His ex-wife Rebecca lived in California now with her new husband. Their daughter Sarah was spending Christmas with her mother this year, and their relationship had been strained since the divorce 5 years ago. Marcus stood up from the table, leaving his barely touched meal behind. He walked to the large window that overlooked the city. Down below, he could see families walking together, carrying shopping bags and holding children's hands. The sight made his chest tighten with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel: loneliness. He remembered when this apartment used to be filled with laughter during the holidays. Sarah would run through the halls in her Christmas pajamas, and Rebecca would spend days decorating every room with care. Now the apartment felt more like a museum than a home, with expensive art on the walls but no warmth in the spaces between. Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. He couldn't spend another minute in this empty apartment. He grabbed his coat from the closet, a thick wool overcoat that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and headed for the elevator. The doorman, George, looked surprised to see him leaving on Christmas Eve. "Going somewhere special tonight, Mr. Wellington?" George asked with genuine concern in his voice. "Just need some air," Marcus replied, though he wasn't sure where he was actually going. The cold December air hit his face as he stepped onto the sidewalk. The city was quieter than usual, with many businesses closed for the holiday. Most restaurants had shut their doors early, leaving only a few places open for those who had nowhere else to go. Marcus walked aimlessly for several blocks, his expensive leather shoes clicking against the wet pavement. He turned down a side street he had never noticed before, despite living in this neighborhood for 10 years. The street was lined with small shops and cafes, most with their lights off and closed signs hanging in their windows. But, at the end of the block, he saw a warm glow coming from a small diner. The neon sign flickered slightly, reading "Mama's Kitchen, open 24 hours. Marcus hesitated at the door. This wasn't the type of place he usually ate at. He was accustomed to 5-star restaurants with wine lists thicker than phone books. But something about the warm light spilling out onto the dark street drew him in. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. The diner was small and simple, with red vinyl booths and a long counter lined with stools. Christmas decorations hung from the ceiling, nothing fancy, just paper snowflakes and tinsel that looked like they had been put up by someone who cared more about spreading joy than impressing anyone. There were only a few other customers scattered throughout the diner. An elderly man sat at the counter, slowly eating soup while reading a newspaper. A young couple shared a slice of pie in a corner booth, talking quietly. Near the window, a woman with 2 small children was trying to keep them entertained with crayons and coloring books while they waited for their food. Behind the counter stood a woman who appeared to be in her early 30s. She had kind eyes and wore her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her name tag read Keisha, and she was wiping down the counter while humming quietly to herself. When she noticed Marcus standing by the door, she smiled warmly. "Welcome to Mama's Kitchen," she said, her voice carrying a genuine friendliness that Marcus hadn't heard in a long time. "You can sit anywhere you'd like." Marcus chose a booth near the back of the diner, partly because he felt out of place in his expensive clothes among the working-class customers. Keisha approached his table with a menu and a cup of coffee without him asking. "I figured you might need something warm on a night like this," she said, setting the cup down in front of him. "Take your time with the menu. No rush here." Marcus looked at the menu, which was laminated and had obviously seen better days. The prices were incredibly low compared to what he was used to paying. Everything was simple comfort food: meatloaf, chicken and dumplings, apple pie. He realized he couldn't remember the last time he had eaten food like this. "What would you recommend?" he asked when Keisha returned. She smiled thoughtfully. "Well, the meatloaf is really good. My grandmother's recipe. And the mashed potatoes are made from scratch. It's comfort food, you know? The kind that makes you feel like someone cares about you." Something in her tone made Marcus look up from the menu. There was a sincerity in her voice that he rarely encountered in his world of business deals and social obligations. "I'll have the meatloaf," he said. "Good choice," Keisha replied. "And, can I ask, are you spending Christmas Eve alone?" The question caught Marcus off guard. In his social circle, people didn't ask personal questions like that. They talked about business, the weather, or mutual acquaintances, but never anything real or meaningful. "Yes," he answered honestly, surprising himself. "I am." Keisha's expression softened with understanding rather than pity. "Well, you're not alone here," she said simply. "I'll get that meatloaf started for you." As she walked away, Marcus found himself watching her interactions with the other customers. She knew the elderly man's name, Harold, and asked about his arthritis. She brought extra crayons for the children at the window table and didn't seem to mind when they colored outside the lines on the paper placemats. She moved through the diner with an ease that spoke of someone who truly cared about the people she served. When his food arrived, Marcus was surprised by how good it tasted. The meatloaf was perfectly seasoned, and the mashed potatoes were creamy and rich. It wasn't fancy, but it was made with care, and he could taste the difference. As he ate, he found himself listening to the conversations around him. The elderly man, Harold, was talking to Keisha about his late wife, how this was his first Christmas without her in 53 years. Instead of rushing him along, Keisha leaned against the counter and listened, occasionally refilling his coffee cup or offering words of comfort. The young couple was discussing their plans to visit family tomorrow, excited about seeing nieces and nephews. The woman with the children was explaining to them why they couldn't go home to their own house tonight, her voice gentle but tired. Marcus gathered that they were staying in a nearby shelter. For the first time in years, Marcus felt connected to something real. These people weren't discussing stock portfolios or vacation homes in the Hamptons. They were talking about love, loss, hope, and survival. They were living authentic lives, even when those lives were difficult. When Keisha came to refill his coffee, Marcus found himself asking, "Do you always work on Christmas Eve?" "Someone has to," she said with a shrug. "There are always people who need a place to go on holidays. Besides, this job helps me take care of my kids." "You have children?" "Two," she said, and her whole face lit up when she spoke about them. "Marcus and Destiny. They're 8 and 6. They're staying with my neighbor tonight so I can work. Tomorrow's my day off, so we'll have our own little Christmas celebration." Marcus felt a strange pang hearing that one of her children shared his name. That must be hard, working on Christmas Eve. "It's worth it," Keisha said without hesitation. "The overtime pay means I can get them each something special for Christmas. And, honestly, I like being here for people who might not have anywhere else to go. Everyone deserves to feel welcome somewhere, especially on Christmas." Her words hit Marcus harder than she could have known. When was the last time he had felt truly welcome anywhere? His business associates tolerated him because he was wealthy and influential. His country club friends included him in their social gatherings because of his status. But who actually welcomed him as a person? As the evening went on, Marcus found himself reluctant to leave. He ordered a piece of apple pie he didn't really want just to have an excuse to stay longer. He watched Keisha work, noting how she never seemed rushed or stressed despite being the only server on duty. She treated every customer as if they were the most important person in the room. Around 9 o'clock, the young couple left, wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. Harold finished his soup and prepared to go, but Keisha walked him to the door and gave him a gentle hug. "You take care of yourself, Harold," she said. "And, remember, you're always welcome here." "Thank you, dear," the old man replied, his eyes misty. "You're an angel, you know that?" Marcus watched this exchange with growing amazement. In his world, People didn't hug their customers or call them angels. Business was business, relationships were strategic, and emotions were weaknesses to be hidden. The woman with the children was struggling to get them ready to leave. The little girl was crying because she was tired, and the boy kept asking why they couldn't go home. Marcus could see the stress and exhaustion on the mother's face as she tried to comfort them while gathering their things. Without thinking, Marcus stood up and walked over to their table. "Excuse me," he said gently. "I couldn't help but notice your children are tired. Would it be okay if I bought them each a hot chocolate for the road? And maybe something sweet?" The woman looked surprised and a bit wary. "That's very kind of you, but you don't need to do that." "I'd like to," Marcus said sincerely. "It's Christmas Eve, after all." Keisha, who had been watching the interaction, stepped forward. "Sarah, this is..." "I'm sorry, I never got your name," she said, looking at Marcus. "Marcus," he replied. "Marcus has been enjoying his dinner here tonight. Sarah and her kids are good people," Keisha added, which seemed to reassure the mother. "If you're sure it's no trouble," Sarah said finally. Marcus nodded to Keisha, who prepared 2 cups of hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. She also wrapped up some cookies in napkins for the children to take with them. When Marcus tried to pay for the treats, Sarah protested, but he insisted. "Sometimes we all need a little kindness from strangers," he said, echoing words he had heard Keisha say earlier. As Sarah and her children left, both kids clutching their hot chocolate and cookies, the little girl turned back and waved at Marcus. "Thank you, mister," she called out. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a warmth he couldn't quite identify. When was the last time he had done something for someone else without expecting anything in return? When had he last been thanked so sincerely by someone who had nothing to give him but gratitude? He returned to his booth, but Keisha followed him over. "That was really sweet of you," she said. "Those kids have been having a tough time. Their mom lost her job last month, and they've been staying at the shelter while she tries to get back on her feet." "How do you know all this?" Marcus asked. "People talk when they feel safe," Keisha explained. "This place, it's not just about the food. It's about giving people a space where they can be themselves without judgment. Where they can feel human." Marcus nodded slowly, beginning to understand something he had never considered before. "You've created something special here." "It's not me," Keisha said modestly. "It's everyone who comes through that door. We all contribute to making this place what it is. Even you, tonight." As the evening continued, Marcus found himself opening up to Keisha in ways he hadn't expected. During quiet moments between serving other customers, she would stop by his table, and they would talk. He told her about his business, but also about his divorce, his strained relationship with his daughter, and the crushing loneliness that had driven him out into the snow tonight. Keisha listened without judgment, offering occasional words of understanding or encouragement. She didn't try to fix his problems or offer empty platitudes. She simply listened, which was something Marcus realized he had been craving for years. "You know," Keisha said during one of their conversations, "loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about feeling disconnected from other people. You can be in a room full of people and still feel lonely if you can't connect with any of them." Her words struck him as profoundly true. Marcus had spent years surrounded by people but feeling utterly alone because all his relationships were superficial, based on what he could do for others or what they could do for him. As closing time approached, Marcus realized he didn't want this evening to end. For the first time in years, he felt like he was having a real conversation with a real person. He felt seen and heard in a way that had nothing to do with his wealth or status. "I should probably head home," he said reluctantly as Keisha began cleaning up around him. "Of course," she said, though her tone suggested she had enjoyed their conversation as much as he had. "I hope you have a wonderful Christmas, Marcus." As he stood to leave, Marcus felt compelled to say something more. "Keisha, thank you. Not just for the meal, but for making me feel welcome. You have a gift for that." She smiled warmly. "Everyone deserves to feel welcome somewhere, Marcus. Remember that." Marcus left a tip that was larger than the cost of his entire meal, but it still didn't feel like enough to express his gratitude for what Keisha had given him tonight. As he walked back out into the snow, he felt different somehow. The loneliness was still there, but it felt less overwhelming now. Looking back at the warm glow of Mama's kitchen, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't ready for this night to be over, and he wasn't ready to go back to his empty apartment. Tomorrow was Christmas Day, and, for the first time in years, he wanted to do something meaningful with it. But, first, he had some thinking to do about what kind of man he wanted to be and what kind of life he wanted to live. Tonight, a woman named Keisha had shown him that wealth meant nothing if you had no one to share it with, but, more importantly, she had shown him what it meant to truly care about other people. The snow continued to fall as Marcus walked through the quiet streets, but he no longer felt cold. Something had awakened in him tonight, something that had been dormant for too long. And, tomorrow, he was going to do something about it. Marcus barely slept that night. He lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from his evening at Mama's kitchen. The warmth he had felt there seemed impossible to recapture in his cold, sterile apartment. By 5 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and made himself coffee, standing by the window watching the city wake up on Christmas Day. The streets below were quiet, with only the occasional car passing by. Most families were probably still asleep, preparing to wake up to Christmas morning traditions. Marcus tried to remember what that felt like, but the memories seemed distant now, like scenes from someone else's life. His phone buzzed with text messages, business associates sending generic holiday greetings, his country club friends inviting him to their New Year's party, his assistant reminding him about meetings scheduled for the week after Christmas. But none of these messages felt personal or meaningful. They were obligations, social contracts, not genuine expressions of care. Marcus thought about Keisha, probably at home with her children, watching them open presents. He imagined the joy on their faces, the laughter filling whatever small space they called home. The image made his chest ache with longing for something he had lost somewhere along the way. Around 9 o'clock, Marcus made a decision. He dressed carefully, choosing casual clothes instead of his usual expensive suits. Jeans, a sweater, comfortable shoes, clothes that wouldn't immediately mark him as different from the people he had met last night. Then, he drove across town to a part of the city he rarely visited, looking for stores that might be open on Christmas Day. He found a small grocery store that catered to the local community, run by a family who had kept it open for people who needed last-minute items for their holiday celebrations. Marcus walked through the aisles, filling his cart with items he had never bought before: ingredients for a home-cooked meal, Christmas cookies, hot chocolate mix, candy canes, and small toys. The elderly man behind the counter looked surprised by Marcus's purchases. "Having a big Christmas celebration?" he asked as he rang up the items. "Something like that," Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure what he was planning yet. Next, he drove to a florist shop that was surprisingly open, run by a woman who explained that she stayed open on holidays for people who needed flowers for hospital visits or last-minute gestures of love. Marcus bought several bouquets of winter flowers, nothing too expensive or showy, just beautiful arrangements that might brighten someone's day. His final stop was a toy store that was closing early but allowed him in when he explained he needed gifts for children. The shop owner, a grandmother who had been running the store for 30 years, helped him select age-appropriate toys: a small doll with a pink dress, some art supplies, a toy car, and several books. Nothing extravagant, but things that children would enjoy. By noon, Marcus was driving back toward Mama's kitchen, his car filled with packages and flowers. He wasn't sure what he was going to do when he got there, but he knew he needed to see Keisha again. Something about their conversation had awakened a part of himself that had been sleeping for too long. When he arrived at the diner, he was surprised to see it was closed. A sign on the door read "Closed Christmas Day, see you tomorrow." But, through the window, he could see lights on in the back room. As he stood there wondering what to do, the front door opened. "Marcus?" Keisha stepped out, looking surprised but pleased to see him. She was wearing jeans and a Christmas sweater instead of her work uniform, and her hair was down around her shoulders. "What are you doing here?" I'm not sure," Marcus admitted. "I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation last night. I wanted to see you again,
to thank you properly for what you did for me. Keisha tilted her head, studying his face. What did I do? You reminded me what it feels like to be human, Marcus said simply. Before Keisha could respond, two children came running out of the diner, a boy and a girl, both wearing new Christmas pajamas and bright smiles. They stopped when they saw Marcus, suddenly, shy in the presence of a stranger. Kids, this is Marcus, Keisha said gently. The man I told you about who was kind to some other children last night. The little girl, who must have been Destiny, stepped forward boldly. Are you the one who bought hot chocolate for the sad kids? Yes, Marcus said, kneeling down to her level. And, you must be Destiny. Your mom told me about you. The boy, younger Marcus, stayed closer to his mother but watched the stranger with curious eyes. We're having Christmas lunch in the diner, Destiny announced. Mama said we could eat anywhere we wanted, and we picked here because we like the Christmas decorations. Keisha looked slightly embarrassed. Our apartment is pretty small, and the kids love the diner. It feels festive to them. Marcus looked at his car full of packages and made a spontaneous decision. Would it be okay if I joined you? I brought some things, if you don't mind. Keisha looked uncertain. Marcus, you don't need to do anything for us. You're a customer, not. I'm a friend, Marcus interrupted gently. At least, I'd like to be. After a moment, Keisha smiled and nodded. Okay. Come on in. The diner looked different during the day, with natural light streaming through the windows. The Christmas decorations that had seemed simple and humble last night now appeared cheerful and welcoming. Someone had set up a small table in one of the booths with place settings for three, but Keisha quickly added another setting for Marcus. I'll get the food from the car, Marcus said. I brought ingredients to cook for you, if you'd let me. You cook? Keisha asked, sounding surprised. I used to, Marcus replied. Before I could afford to have other people do it for me. But I think I remember how. For the next hour, Marcus found himself in the small kitchen behind the diner, preparing a Christmas meal with Keisha's help. He made glazed ham using a recipe he remembered from his childhood, while she prepared vegetables and homemade biscuits. The children helped by setting the table and arranging the flowers Marcus had brought. It had been decades since Marcus had cooked a meal with his own hands, and he had forgotten how satisfying it could be. The simple act of preparing food for people he cared about felt more meaningful than any business deal he had ever closed. Your hands are shaking, Keisha observed as Marcus tried to slice the ham. I'm nervous, he admitted with a laugh. It's been a long time since I cooked for anyone. Why did you stop? Marcus paused, considering the question. Success, I suppose. The more money I made, the less I did for myself. I hired people to cook, clean, shop, even wrap my Christmas presents. I thought I was freeing myself up for more important things, but now I wonder if those were the important things. Keisha nodded thoughtfully. My grandmother used to say that when you stop taking care of the people you love with your own hands, you start forgetting how to love them at all. The meal was simple but delicious. Marcus sat at the small table with Keisha and her children, sharing stories and laughter. Destiny was a chatterbox, telling him all about her favorite books and her dreams of becoming a teacher. Young Marcus was quieter but warmed up gradually, eventually showing Marcus his drawings and asking about the fancy car parked outside. Why don't you have kids? Destiny asked suddenly, with the blunt curiosity of childhood. Destiny, Keisha said gently, that's a personal question. It's okay, Marcus said. I do have a daughter, but she's grown up now. We don't see each other very much anymore. Why not? Destiny persisted. Marcus considered how to explain the complexities of his relationship with Sarah to a 6-year-old. Sometimes when people get busy with work and other things, they forget to make time for the people they love. And then, after a while, it becomes hard to remember how to be close again. You should call her, young Marcus suggested with the simple wisdom of childhood. On Christmas. Maybe I will, Marcus said, realizing that the idea didn't seem as impossible as it had yesterday. After lunch, Marcus presented the children with the toys he had brought.
He had worried that the gifts might be inappropriate or that Keisha would feel uncomfortable accepting them, but her children's joy made all his concerns disappear. Destiny hugged her new doll tightly, and young Marcus immediately began building imaginary cities with his new toy cars. "You didn't need to do this," Keisha said quietly as they watched the children play.
"Yes, I did," Marcus replied. "Not for you, exactly, but for me. I needed to remember what it feels like to give something without expecting anything in return." Keisha studied his face. "What happened to you, Marcus? What made you so lonely?" It was a question no one had ever asked him directly. In his social circle, people pretended that successful men like him couldn't be lonely. They assumed that wealth and status were enough to fulfill anyone.
"I think I traded my life for my lifestyle," Marcus said slowly.
"I worked so hard to have everything that I forgot to be anything.
I forgot to be a good husband, a good father, a good friend.
I forgot to be a good person."
"But you are a good person," Keisha said. "I saw it last night, and I'm seeing it now."
"Maybe," Marcus said. "Or maybe I'm just remembering how to be one." As the afternoon wore on, more people began stopping by the diner.
Harold, the elderly man from last night, knocked on the window and waved. Keisha let him in, explaining that he often spent holidays at the diner because he had nowhere else to go. "I brought some of my late wife's Christmas cookies," Harold said, holding up a tin.
"Thought maybe we could share them." Soon, other regulars began arriving.
Sarah, the woman with the children from last night, came by with her kids to thank Marcus again for his kindness. The young couple from the corner booth stopped in to wish Keisha a Merry Christmas and give her a card. Marcus watched in amazement as the small diner filled with people who had found each other in this simple place. They weren't related by blood or connected by business interests. They were brought together by something much more powerful, the human need for connection and belonging. "This happens every holiday," Keisha explained to Marcus as she moved around the room, refilling coffee cups and making sure everyone felt welcome.
"People just show up. They know they'll find family here."
"Family," Marcus repeated, testing the word. It had been a long time since he had felt like part of a family. As evening approached, people began to leave to attend other Christmas obligations or simply to go home. Harold invited Marcus to join him for a walk around the neighborhood to see the Christmas lights, and Marcus surprised himself by accepting. The two men walked slowly through the quiet streets, Harold pointing out houses where he had lived decades ago, sharing stories about the neighborhood's history. Marcus found himself telling Harold about his business, but also about his failed marriage and his relationship with his daughter. "It's never too late to reach out," Harold said. "My wife and I had some rough patches over the years. There were times when we barely spoke to each other. But we always found our way back because we decided that being right was less important than being together." When they returned to the diner, most of the other visitors had left. Keisha was cleaning up while her children colored at one of the tables, their new toys scattered around them. "I should probably go," Marcus said, though he was reluctant to leave this warm, welcoming space. "Where will you go?" Keisha asked. Marcus realized he hadn't thought about it. "Home, I suppose." "To your empty apartment?" The directness of her question caught him off guard, but he appreciated her honesty. "Yes." Keisha was quiet for a moment, then said, "You could stay a little longer, if you want. The kids will probably fall asleep soon, and we could talk." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude. "I'd like that." As the children began to yawn and rub their eyes, Keisha made up a cozy sleeping area for them in one of the large booths, using cushions and blankets she kept in the back room. Soon both children were fast asleep, Destiny still clutching her new doll. Marcus and Keisha sat at the counter, sharing a pot of coffee and talking quietly so they wouldn't wake the children. The conversation ranged from serious topics to silly observations, from childhood memories to dreams for the future. "What's your biggest regret?" Keisha asked during a quiet moment. Marcus thought carefully before answering. "I think it's that I spent so many years thinking that being successful meant being separate from other people.
I thought I had to choose between being wealthy and being happy, and I chose wealth. But, watching you today, seeing how you live, I realize I could have had both if I had just remembered what really matters. What's that? People, Marcus said simply. The people you love, the people who love you, the people you help, the people who help you. Everything else is just stuff. Keisha nodded. My grandmother used to say that at the end of your life, nobody remembers how much money you had or what kind of car you drove. They remember how you made them feel. As midnight approached, marking the end of Christmas Day, Marcus realized he had experienced something he hadn't felt in years: pure contentment. He wasn't thinking about his stock portfolio or his business meetings next week. He wasn't worried about his social status or his public image. He was simply present in this moment, with these people, feeling more like himself than he had in decades. Keisha, he said quietly, would you let me help you? Help me how? Marcus hesitated, not wanting to offend her or make her feel like a charity case. I know you're working hard to take care of your kids, and you're doing an amazing job. But, if there were things that would make life easier for you: better housing, help with childcare, money for the kids' education, would you let me help with that? Keisha was quiet for so long that Marcus began to worry he had overstepped. Finally, she said, why would you want to do that? Because yesterday I was a rich man who had everything and nothing, Marcus replied. Today, because of you, I feel like a human being again. That's worth more than money, but money is all I have to give right now. Keisha smiled softly. You have more to give than you think, Marcus. But, yes, if you really want to help, I won't be too proud to accept it. Not for me, but for my kids. As Marcus prepared to leave, he felt like he was saying goodbye to more than just Keisha and her children. He was saying goodbye to the old version of himself, the lonely, disconnected man who had wandered into this diner less than 24 hours ago. Standing at the door, he turned back to look at the sleeping children and at Keisha, who had given him the greatest Christmas gift he could have imagined: the chance to remember who he really was. Same time tomorrow? He asked. We'll be here, Keisha replied with a smile. Marcus walked out into the cold Christmas night, but this time he wasn't alone. He carried with him the warmth of new friendships, the joy of meaningful connection, and the hope that his life could be different from this day forward. For the first time in years, Marcus Wellington was excited about tomorrow. The next morning, Marcus woke up before his alarm clock, something that hadn't happened in years. Instead of the usual dread he felt about facing another empty day, he found himself looking forward to seeing Keisha and her children again. He had slept better than he had in months, despite staying up late talking at the diner. As he showered and dressed, Marcus found himself humming another thing he hadn't done in years. He chose comfortable clothes again, realizing that his expensive suits felt like costumes now, disguises he wore to play a role that no longer fit him. Before leaving for the diner, Marcus sat down at his desk and did something he had been avoiding for months. He picked up his phone and dialed his daughter Sarah's number. His hands shook slightly as he waited for her to answer. Dad? Sarah's voice came through the phone, surprised but not unwelcoming. Is everything okay? Hi, sweetheart, Marcus said, his voice catching slightly on the endearment he hadn't used in years. I wanted to call and wish you a Merry Christmas. I know it's late, but I was thinking about you yesterday. There was a pause before Sarah responded. Thank you. That's really nice to hear. How was your Christmas? Different, Marcus said honestly. Better than it has been in a long time. Sarah, I know we haven't talked much lately, and I know that's mostly my fault. I was wondering if maybe we could have dinner sometime soon. Just the two of us? Another pause, longer this time. I'd like that, Dad. I really would. Good, Marcus said, feeling relief wash over him. I'll call you later this week and we can set something up. And, Sarah? I love you. I know I don't say that enough, but I do. I love you too, Dad, Sarah replied, and Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. After ending the call, Marcus felt lighter somehow, as if he had set down a heavy weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. The conversation with his daughter had gone better than he had dared to hope,
and it gave him courage for the other changes he wanted to make in his life.
When Marcus arrived at Mama's kitchen, the diner was busy with the lunch crowd.
He could see Keisha moving between tables, taking orders and serving food with the same warm efficiency he had admired 2 nights ago. She spotted him through the window and waved, gesturing for him to find a seat anywhere. Marcus chose a table near the back where he could watch the flow of customers without being in the way. The diner felt different in the bright afternoon light, bustling with conversation and the clatter of dishes. It was clearly a neighborhood institution, a place where people came not just for food but for connection. He watched Keisha work, noting how she remembered every customer's preferences, how she checked on the elderly diners a little more frequently, how she always had a kind word for the children who came in with their parents. She made everyone feel special, just as she had made him feel special 2 nights ago. When the lunch rush began to slow down, Ku